Hello, my name is Adam Prignitz, and today we are going to review my graduate project presentation for ICT 505. This project is going to be looking at the higher levels of the implementation process and not so much the nitty-gritty details, as we could likely be here for days. For my project, I reviewed 2 ERP systems and their implementation processes. To give you a brief overview on these systems, EVO ERP is an ERP system that evolved to a Windows skin and menu system from its parent system called DBA Manufacturing. It offers a complete package solution to the manufacturing needs where the customer pays per seat rather than modules like most systems today. ECi M1 offers a complete package solution. M1 is the manufacturing software from ECi's large variety of offerings. Something unique about the system is that it is essentially fully customizable. It's a Windows-based system that reflects the Microsoft Outlook platform. This system is currently being implemented at my place of work and has definitely been an eye-opening experience. While this is my first implementation, it is my hope to do many more in the future. The scope of this project was to evaluate the best practices of 2 ERP systems and explain the best of the best based on the information design model. My findings in the scope is going to identify the steps necessary for a successful implementation. Out of scope is going to identify the steps necessary outside of the standard steps to the implementation process. It is my assumption that I would find many similarities between the two companies' processes for implementation. Implementing a new system does allow for commonalities, especially when the end result will come out the same. When reviewing the data collected for each ERP company, this assumption was confirmed. As shown in the upcoming similarities slide versus the differences slide, the similarities list is much longer. The assumption for differences was that it would obviously be present, but the list shortened. This was also confirmed during the data review. Some companies have a different plan of attack when it comes to implementing, but much like the similarities, they too come to the same end result of a successful system. The dependencies required to complete this review was implementation guides from each enterprise, referencing either tech support or the implementation specialist provided by the enterprise. The data which was reviewed came from many sources. Both enterprises provided implementation guides, which is where a majority of the information came from. Having worked with both companies, there has been a long-standing relationship, which makes requests for data much easier to retrieve. Tech support and the implementation specialist were both great resources when the information may not have been clear enough. EVO offered many different documents which are provided at the beginning of the implementation. While they offered many resources, we were considered the experts in our data, so they really only gave options to what was seen in the past and what data needed to go in where in the system. While every business does not want to go over their allotted timeline, more times than none this does happen. The implementation team starts digging into the data and finds that the way they are executing a process doesn't necessarily match up to the new system's processes, or processes haven't been set in place. So now this needs to happen and that process needs to be developed. EVO does put a timeline towards the implementation, but M1 does not. They ask that one is developed so they can stay on task for their trainings, but their timeline is 100% up to the customer. During the implementation, a solid understanding of the fields and data that is required for those fields is something that is generally not thought of, but is a necessity for successful implementation. Learning what field from the legacy system needs to align with the upgraded system is the key to success. Good data in will make everyone's lives easier when go live comes around. At the beginning of implementation, both companies send out implementation specialists to start on getting the customer trained to understand their system. This can be key to a successful launch, but if the customer doesn't understand the system they just purchased, right off the bat, they could fall short on their implementation and not be ready at go live. After the decision has been made to purchase a new ERP system, or any system at that, an implementation team will need to be assembled. This is common across the board when it comes to implementation. We will now look at the most common topics of implementation that was found when analyzing EVO and M1. Both companies offer the bare bones strategy to implementing. This process is just how it sounds. It is not going to give the customer the day-to-day use, but more the basic understanding of what is necessary to move to the next task. It gives the user some freedom to work at their own pace, and as more data is ready to be moved in, they are able to filter that in. If the strategy was more along the lines of a complete data migration, that would mean they were 100% ready and knew their data would fit perfectly into the new system. This leads into our next topic, data cleanup. It is generally likely that some sort of cleanup will need to be done to the data that currently exists. No data will align perfectly. An example of this would be a manufacturing company's processes. One system may not have the capability to utilize scanning at the assembly level, whereas the new system might. The team will need to take the time to simplify the steps, or the operators in the production may spend more time scanning into an operation versus actually working on that assembly. This isn't something that would be in the main scope of the implementation, but could be seen as an outside of the scope because it can vary from one company to another. Basic information is necessary for both vendor implementations. Both setups will cover the company information, but also set up the default settings for the ERP system to run at. Examples of these might be the costing method used for jobs, whether it be last cost or standard cost. Accounting is obviously something very important to many companies. This is where all the financials are handled and where the assets are tracked. This is generally done at the location of the customer facility, but in some instances, some of the accounting is handled off-site. There are various factors which are even outside of the general scope for implementation that have to be looked at. Is the company currently handling all financials through their current system? Does the new system allow for easier or harder processing of financials? Does it make sense to process the funds in-house or outsource? Part setup is a commonality between these two systems. They were designed for a manufacturing company to implement, so part setup is given. This would lead into bills of material, assembly operations, and even costing. Employee setup is a must when it comes to any system, but these two in particular also have a lot to rely on the employees for. Not only are the employees needed to tracking their hours of work during a week, but it also can affect the cost of a job. Having and knowing true costs will only help a company become more successful. In manufacturing, most jobs are never completed in one specific location on the shop floor. Having the proper departments and locations on the shop floor is crucial with the setup in these two companies. This is going to help parts move through the shop to completion without any hang-ups, hopefully. It's also going to help keep track of inventory so when a cycle count needs to be completed, it can be located and counted quickly. Testing is necessary throughout the implementation. While the implementation would be the most logical to do this, the users who are most intimate with a specific module will be the better option. This brings us to the last point on in-house training. As the team feels confident they have all of the data input and have a solid understanding of the module, it's time to bring in everyday users. These people have the best knowledge of their jobs and will quickly find out if there is something wrong with the module they'll be working in the most. Bringing them up to speed and making sure they are comfortable will only make go launch time much easier. Now that we've heard what is similar between the two companies' implementations, let's take a look at what some of the key differences are. There are many options for implementation strategies. EVO offers bare bones, like we heard about earlier, Pareto's 80-20, which is 20% of the data generates 80% of the business, and complete data migration, which is just as it sounds, having everything brought in at once. M1's approach is the bare bones approach, but it could almost be considered an evolutionary approach. Once the bare bones are in, the customer will need to evolve into a full data migration before go live. M1's strategy for timing of go live is that the customer paid for the system and they can decide on the time needed to launch. EVO takes a different route and gives a multi-phase plan. The first 3 phases are estimated to be completed in roughly 7 weeks, but the final phase would be completed at the beginning of the customer's fiscal period. This is a more direct approach and may not be as appeasing to some customers as others. M1 offers a checklist that will track the amount of time to completion to the assigned users. Their tasks are tracked all the way through to the completion. This works great as a guideline for what should be next in the process of implementation. Both EVO and M1 offer implementation or go-live documents. However, they vary in what is covered on each. For example, EVO provides an accounting flowchart, data guide, upload guide, implementation documents, implementation strategy and timeline, and a manufacturing system flowchart. M1 just offers one document which covers the setup of all topics covered in the checklist that was described before. It does not have the flowcharts, which for someone not very confident in the ERP system could be a good guide to follow. Support is also something that has differed between the two, and during implementation is very different. M1 offers multiple support call centers between Texas and California, which allows them to be on Central and Western time zones, making sure that they can cover many customers throughout the country at once and at any given time. EVO is only located in California and has one tech support agent. Usually when calling into tech support, there is no answer if a message is left, no callback is given, and an answer isn't usually received until actual contact is made with support at EVO. In regards to M1, they will work with the customer, remote log into the customer screen to help diagnose the issue, and if they can't get an answer, they will have one within 24 hours. While importing data to the system, templates are generally needed to be created. M1 support provided a template to create the table that would allow data fields to be customized for import. The final topic that in differences is their training. M1 offers online for specific modules of their system. This will help the users become much more understanding as to what is necessary or why a field needs to be filled out. Outside of the initial training, EVO does not offer any additional training on the modules, which can lead to bigger issues where the users may not have that complete system understanding. Now that we have looked at the good, the bad, and the ugly, let's take a look at what it would take to have the best implementation process. First and foremost would be the implementation style, which would be bare bones. As described earlier, it really is what is needed to get the system up and running. Once put in, the core data can start to be brought in. While bare bones doesn't necessarily describe this, it's the starting point, and the 80-20 method should be utilized. This will ensure all of the data has been gone through, it's clean, and ready to be entered into a live environment. Timelines are definitely critical as well. Having a timeline will always help keep a project on task. While not many customers will like to be pushed on their time frames, because work and customers do come before their needs, having a good idea for when a reasonable time for go live would be good, especially if it gives the customer something to work towards. Even offering incentives or kickbacks to the customer may help them stay on task and push to get the launch completed. As described briefly in the implementation style, the data being put in gradually will be crucial to a successful launch. If data is not being reviewed and cleaned up, Bad data in means bad data out. This may be a task for the super user of the software, but the information going in will be most critical for success. M1 offers a great support for implementation. This is something that should be standard across the board with any software company. A user doesn't want to call support to leave a message. They call because they are stuck and need help to get out of the hole they are in. Having someone on the other end and able to help, whether it's day 6, the implementation specialist just left, and because of the data cram that was made in the last week, a refresher is needed. Not only is the module training a benefit to many customers, but in-house training is critical as well. Having a good training plan put together will help instill confidence into the users. It's much like a snowball rolling downhill. If it starts out small and is problematic, then the snowball will grow, and eventually crash dramatically. Whereas if that snowball starts small and runs smoothly, it will continue down the hill and grow, eventually coming to a successful stop. I want to thank you again for taking the time to review this data with me. All my data was gathered from the EVO and M1 websites, which can be clicked on the screen. Lynn Pantic with EVO is actually a co-owner with the company and has been there since the get-go, and who does definitely provide a wealth of knowledge. She provided the key documents necessary for the implementation. Kyle Cordry with M1 is our implementation specialist and has also been a wealth of knowledge. He assisted with many technical questions and provided the implementation manuals and documents. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you again.